Newsnight's post-debate coverage included two big beasts of the UK political landscape, Mick Lynch and Piers Morgan. And surprisingly, there was a lot of agreement about one thing: Keir Starmer and the big economic problems facing a new Labour government. This was Piers Morgan.
They're going to have a problem, Labour, whatever happens. There is no money. We all know there's no money. This is not like 97 when Tony Blair came sweeping in with a massive landslide win, but had a very strong economy and was able to hit the ground running and do what he wanted to do. Keir Starmer's not going to have that if he wins this election. There is no money.
There is quite a lot of money in this country.
Well, there is the way you want to raise it, which is to raise taxes on the rich.
There is plenty of money in the country. It's just a matter of whether you want to get some of it and distribute it more equitably.
You want to take it from the rich and give it to the poor. I get that. And I, by the way, full respect for that. But the reality is Keir Starmer will not say anything like that before the election. No. He doesn't want to scare the animals and the children. He wants to basically get over the line, get power. And I understand that and I respect it. As Tony Blair always said, that you can have all the fancy plans in the world. If you don't get power, it's pointless. So Keir Starmer wants and needs to win. But at the moment, I'm looking at him thinking, I don't see any great ideology to drag this country out of the doldrums. And I'm not sure voters who watch that debate will think that either. He looked a little bit shifty and evasive to me.
Did he?
I don't think he's shifty and evasive. I think he is what he presents, that he's careful. And that may win in the election, but it may not endear him to the country as we go forward. There have been some very vanilla politicians in the past who've been successful. Clement Attlee wasn't a great speaker. He wasn't a radical, but he was bold, strangely. He was a moderate, bold person. And you can win an election like that. You can say, look, you can trust me, but I've got to do some of these things to change the country round. If we want to rebuild our infrastructure, our care service, NHS, everyone knows it costs money, and people are prepared to pay for it if you deliver a better system. And I think they should have gone with that message. Unfortunately, they haven't, so they're going to take government without a particularly strong message about anything.
And I think that's
one of the problems.
It's really interesting there. I mean, they're two sort of big personalities who often they're often sort of talked about as controversial, but they seem to be trying to sort of out-reasonable each other there. Both of them. Both of them saying, I understand why he's doing it, but there's nothing to suggest that this project is beyond winning an election, which Labour is set to do. And I don't think we can completely, obviously that's got a lot to do with the collapse of the Tory party, but it has got a lot to do with the fact that Keir Starmer isn't scaring anyone, right? That's probably one of the reasons they're so far ahead. But they both recognise that, this isn't 1997. You can't say we're not going to raise taxes, but we are going to improve public services, or it's much more difficult to do that. That is, in fact, what Labour did in 1997. They said, we won't increase taxes, but we will increase public services. They were able to do that because that was an era of quite high economic growth. The global conditions were positive. Now we are in an era of very low economic growth, and so promising to increase public or improve public services without raising taxes is much more difficult, especially we've got a much older population now than we did back then. Labour, therefore, hasn't given itself much space for economic big thinking, having tied themselves to conservative fiscal rules. And Mick Lynch was sort of asked again about that strategy.
Mick Lynch, what do you think about Labour essentially sticking to the same fiscal rules as the Conservatives? You alluded to it earlier. Do you understand why that is Sir Keir Starmer's strategy?
I understand why they think they should do it, but I do think it's a mistake. We need an alternative industrial and economic strategy. We need to reskill the country, get good jobs into working class communities. We need to re-equip working class housing. That will allow us to tackle global warming and all the rest of it. They had a good plan. The 28 billion a year was a good plan. You have to borrow to re-equip the country for the future. And they should be out defending that strategy. Instead, they've junked it, which is a worrying retreat.
But
we wanted them to be bold.
They argue things changed after Liz Truss, and that's why they junked it. Do you not believe that?
But you get returns on investment. If you invest in people's jobs and their skills and their future, and in our housing stock, and we had bold ideas such as council housing, not social housing, council houses being built to address working class needs, the working class would support that. And what working people aren't finding is they're getting a very bold Labour policy. What they will do is vote to get the Tories out. And we need to get Labour in order to get the Tories out. And that's what this election will be about. And that's disappointing. It should be about ideas. It should be about an alternative. Even if you disagree with it, it would be nice to be having that debate about an alternative.
It's obviously a very good argument about sort of borrowing to invest. I mean, there are some sort of I have been reading some interesting analysis recently. There's an economic blogger called Chris Dillow. I think he calls himself Rutland's most successful Marxist economist, something like that. Anyway, he wrote this very interesting blog post saying, actually, probably with an economy like this, you do need to sort of tax to spend instead of borrowing to spend. And the reason isn't because, we've maxed out the credit card. That's sort of a silly way of talking about the economy. He's saying the reason is that we've actually got full employment in this country. And if you want to sort of redirect labor towards labor as in sort of small L labor, workers, towards rebuilding a green economy, you actually want some industries to decline. In sort of a Keynesian would say, when you're in this sort of, when you've got high levels of unemployment, it's very good to borrow to invest. If you've got no unemployment or very low unemployment, which we have at the moment, if you want to redirect where those people are working to increase productivity, you're going to have to sort of take some demand out of the economy. And the best way to do that is by taxing sort of the better off, or taxing sort of, I suppose, activities that aren't particularly useful. So I'm leaning towards you want to tax to spend instead of borrow to spend, but I think the worst of all worlds is to say we just won't spend, which is kind of what the Labour Party is saying. Let's go back to Piers Morgan. He had this to say about Labour's approach.
Again, just to reiterate, the way the polls are at the moment, Labour are heading for a massive, possibly historic landslide win. But Mick's absolutely right. The real problem is going to come the day after the election for Labour. And if they dig themselves into a hole, which they're currently doing, of not really being straight with people, not really committing to anything that is more than tinkering around the edges, we're all going to wake up and think, oh, brave new world, Labour after 14 years. And what are they actually going to be able to do? Because at the moment, public finances in this country are in the tank.
But Labour are saying that. So Keir Starmer is saying that. So is Rachel Reeves. They are saying it will be a very poor economic inheritance, and we will not be able to do, Labour say, if they win, all the things that we would want to do.
But they will end the incompetence and the corruption and the merry-go-round of politicians just looking after themselves.
Will they?
People are really sick.
Will they?
Well, I think
You
they
seem
will.
very confident.
I think they're more competent people. I think they're more straightforward people, but they need to get some vision.
It's very interesting. Dahlia, what did you make of that? You've got sort of two big beasts of UK politics, often thought to be quite controversial. They're both basically saying, yeah, you might as well vote Labour, but might not be that great. It's very reasonable, not particularly exciting analysis from both of them, I thought.
I mean, it's interesting seeing how Piers Morgan behaves when someone that he's, respects and is maybe a little bit intimidated by is sitting next to him. I mean, I have to say it's. I'm obviously probably a bit harsher on Starmer than both Mick and Piers Morgan. I don't think that Keir Starmer is a more straightforward person than Boris Johnson or Rishi Sunak. I think actually he's really very much cut from the same cloth. I think Starmer's Labour is cut from the same cloth when it comes to what their ideology actually about what the point of politics is. And I think that especially this idea that, we're inheriting a bad economy, so we can't do anything. The NHS was built from the ashes of a world war. So the idea, that you can't create a new world out of the rubble of the old world is completely farcical. If anything, the kinds of systemic crises that we've lived through over the past, 5 years, particularly when it comes to COVID, cost of living crisis, that is all a reason, even more so, to be putting in the work to rewiring our economy. Because we know, you just have to walk through the city of London to know that there is a shit ton of money in this country. The point is that it is all concentrated in one very small part of London's economy. But the thing is, and those people are living fantastically. Those people have the highest quality of living of any point in human history. But at the same time, we have let them get away with thinking that they are the entire world and that they are the only people that should be catered to in terms of political campaigning. Because when Mick Lynch and Piers Morgan both say, Labour don't want to scare anyone off, they don't mean everyday regular people who want to see more funding on the NHS and who agree with ideas of like a windfall tax on energy companies, who agree with taxing the very, very, very top percentage of people in this country in order to fund social care services at NHS and the NHS. When they say we don't want to scare people, what they mean is we don't want to scare the City of London, and we don't want to scare, the people who run. We don't want to scare like the media, essentially. We don't want to scare like the media barons, the Rupert Murdochs of the world, who see their role as securing the interests of that financial elite to, continue. And it's an indictment that they are the people that influence political communications, political ideology, and political strategy so much more than the majority of this country, who, because of our financialized economy, because of our economy that focuses on a very small number of financialized activities that happen in the city of London, that the rest of the country has basically been seen as kind of redundant. And that's what our economy has done. It has shifted every focus, all the political and economic focus, into a tiny segment, small number of activities, and rendered, basically surplus so much that's happening, all of the other economic activities that make up our society, that make up the rest of the country. The idea that, Piers Morgan can say there's no money left in the country, that is a testament to the fact that despite the fact that they are on course to win this landslide election, the mentality of Starmer's Labour is a loser mentality. They've gone in saying, oh, we're not really going to be able to achieve anything. We're not really going to be able to do anything. We're going to U-turn on anything that disrupts the city of London, like even in a minor way. I mean, it's loser talk. And even if they win the election, everything points to a broader sense that they're going to lose the broader struggle to actually make people's lives in this country livable.